I want to thank the scholarship and insight of educator Abby Sosland for introducing me to some of the concepts for today. Shabbat Shalom. My son in somewhat rural Ohio at the moment, nonetheless, bless him, does a little Torah study every week with a friend. Oh, does that give me a good feeling? And he wrote to me yesterday, sending a very big, tired emoji face, and said, "Oh, mommy," he wrote, "that Parshat Pinchas, what long lists of names, and the Sukkot offerings, oh." It was this tired little sad face. And I wrote back to him and I said, "Yes, Jared, but in it, it's one of the first words you ever learned, certainly in Yiddish, which was Mishpocha. This parsha is all about Mishpocha. When my father was alive, he got the biggest kick out of my very, very little son, saying when my parents would arrive to the house in Los Angeles, my tiny little son would say, "Mommy, the Ganze Mishpocha is here." This pleased my father to no end. So the Ganze Mishpocha, the whole family. Mishpocha is one of those words that we might be tempted to think, I know you all know differently, but we might be tempted to think is a word that started with Yiddish, but in fact it is very much a Hebrew word, mishpacha, family, and the Hebrew word for family, mishpacha, I like it better in Yiddish, mishpocha, appears in this Torah portion. I won't ask you to count, because it will take a while, 90 times. 90 times the word mishpacha appears in Parshat Pinchas. What makes a family? Pinchas seems to know the answer. The portion opens with a pretty unequivocal statement of who qualifies. At the start of the reading, Pinchas is rewarded for passionately defending God's family by killing that Israelite man who had transgressed with a Midianite woman. In the biblical era, the Torah was clear that this couple had crossed a familial boundary. Now, we learn nothing about these two people except their family identities. We only have that in a couple of other places, also with the incident of the blasphemer in Leviticus. Once in a while, in the middle of an otherwise a very large story or with big starring characters or just generalized descriptions of the people, we get really specific details about who a couple of people were. The name of the Israelite who was killed, the one who was killed with the Midianite woman, to make sure we know, was Zimri, son of Salu, chieftain of a Samuelite ancestral house. And the name of the Midianite woman who was killed was Cosbi, daughter of Tsur. Tsur was the tribal head of an ancestral house in Midian. The message seems to be self-evident for the biblical author. Crossing traditional family lines was dangerous. It led to violence, rupture, very bad behavior in public, and plague. To underline the point, the text follows the story with another reminder of the centrality of family. As soon as the plague is over, Moses and Eleazar are commanded to take a census of the people, each grouping defined by its ancestor and its clan. In other words, by their mishpocha. As the census unfolds, we learn of the many Israelite families traveling in the desert. And in the next two chapters, mishpacha, mishpochot, is repeated again and again, sometimes, as Rabbi Rubin can attest, up to 4 times in a single verse. What is the repetition trying to teach? We come to see that the definition of family is actually more complicated than it originally appeared. And some of the families listed don't look like the standard model at all. Some families have experienced loss. In Numbers 26, the Torah refers to the death of Korach and the tragic death of Aaron's sons. In the midst of the counting, we learned that the children of an evil man lived on, and the children of a good man died. We were reminded of such. It is a rare family, the Torah tells us, that gets by without tragedy or drama. Other families in this parsha break the conventional mold in other ways. The daughters of Tzalofchad defy tradition and the established family model by declaring that they should inherit their father's land, even though he died without male heirs. They actually get the law rewritten to work with the reality of their particular family situation. and other possibilities for family variations are written into the law at the same time. As we see in Numbers 28, if a man dies without leaving a son, you shall transfer his property to his daughter. If he has no daughter, you shall assign his property to his brothers. If he has no brothers, you shall assign his property to his father's brothers. If his father had no brothers, you shall assign his property to his nearest relative in his own Mishpocha, and he shall inherit it. Take a little bit of comfort from some of these descriptions of family, because as was noted recently, just in a little Shabbat gathering last night, I have about as much immediate family as can barely fill a nice table in our social hall, but that was letting me to think so much about the definition of family. We all know that family is made up of the people that are close to you, and that the family you choose can often be closer than the family that blood has given to you. The Torah offers models of connection that complement or even sidestep traditional family structures, going all the way back to Genesis, we might remember. But as far as we're getting in this section of our Torah, when we're thinking even of Moses and Joshua, Moses is out of his traditional family unit to pass on his authority to the sons of another man, Joshua, the son of Nun. In fact, Moses seems to have a rather broken family. We're not sure exactly what Aaron and Miriam were upset about regarding Moses' wife, but a prevailing theory is that he had stopped being intimate with his wife, and they were upset about that. So Moses' own marriage, reading very much between the lines, seems to have maybe been on the rocks. We certainly don't know anything really about Mrs. Moses. And he almost never connects with his own children. He places his hands instead on his successor and grants Joshua a measure of his own authority. Joshua is identified as the son of Nun, but it would seem by the Torah's account that the true father-son relationship in his life is with Moses. The biological family unit, the Torah tells us, is not the only way to find deep connection and meaning. Passing on legacy can happen in a multiplicity of ways. I'm often asked my own opinion on what the Jewish people is. Is the Jewish people a race, an ethnicity, a nationality, a religion, a civilization? And I always give the same answer. It seems so obvious to me that we bend ourselves in a lot of pretzels trying to figure out what the Jewish people is. The Jewish people, if nothing else, is a mishpocha. It's a family. And it behaves in every possible way like a family. Dysfunctional, loving, loyal, sometimes angry, sometimes forgiving. Sometimes we absolutely forget to whom we're related. Sometimes we stop speaking to each other. But always at the end of the day, and maybe it's just a way I need to comfort myself, I like to believe, I need to believe, that the Jewish people is a family. We come in all colors, shapes, and sizes. We're born, live, and pass away in every possible country and corner of the world. But everywhere we go, we're supposed to receive one another like family. Fractious and messy, but ultimately caring for one another and always, always leaving the light on so that people have a place to come home to. Parshat Pinchas ends with a description of the festival rites and sacrifices. Whatever the structure of the families, communal celebrations were to be open to all members of the wider Mishpocha of the people of Israel. It's a powerful ending to a portion that started with a black and white picture of who does and who doesn't belong, but finishes with a more nuanced understanding of the reality of family life. The truth is, as you all know, we live in full witness to the ever-changing nature of the Jewish family. But these rituals, these communal celebrations, these Shabbats, these places of gathering are supposed to feel like home. And I know that home is complicated and family can be utterly turned upside down and be so difficult and so painful for so many of us. But that's supposed to be then the times when we reach out to our larger family and say, I've come home. I'm here. Will you take me in? I want to just mention one more thing about this parsha. The daughters of Tzilafchad are particularly powerful as a group of women, sisters that stand together. There is strength in their numbers, and they come forward and they do make a very big change. But it's one that we ought not to take for granted. And I just want to take one moment to say that I have this deep feeling of concern in our country for religious denominations that have just recently expelled members of their communities for having female pastors. This took place a few weeks ago in enormously imbalanced numbers. The Southern Baptist Convention voted to expel 2 churches with female pastors, Fern Creek Baptist Church in Kentucky and Saddleback Church in Southern California, a mega church. They didn't want their dues anymore. The fact that they had female pastors was enough to have them expelled. And a lot of Jewish voices, we may have completely different religious or political leanings from some of these churches and the members they're in, but the fact that the churches were expelled because they had female pastors is chilling. Nothing else about their ministry, about their own politics, their own preaching, nothing else mattered. The only thing that mattered was that these churches had female pastors. And that is really frightening. It's easy to stand on a bima and forget the giant shoulders on which the women rabbis stand. And so I just want to make sure that we don't ever take for granted the privileges that the women in the liberal Jewish world have, and to look to the model of the daughters of Tzilafchad in this parsha, to remember that taking our Jewish family for granted is something we can never do. We argue, we debate, we might mightily disagree, but I am so grateful to be part of a Jewish family that ultimately, with all of our faults and our foibles, does welcome women to this place. And I want to give a shout out to the brave women in Jewish history who helped pave that way. So I am grateful to our Ganze Mishpocha. Thank you for being here today to remind each other what family is all about. Shabbat Shalom.